Oh, hey, what's happening there, YouTube? It's Brian House here for Housemade, and I've got a new project in my workshop. Millions of you on Instagram have watched me build these coffee scoops over the last few months, and now we've decided to put together a kit so you can make your own coffee scoop. One of the things I love about this project is that there's a lot of people who follow this channel who are knife makers and do other types of metal work, but they haven't really branched out into non-ferrous materials like copper and brass. And so this kind of indoctrinates you into that process. Also, there's a business end to it because these coffee scoops sell for quite a bit of money. So, you know, if you're making things in your workshop already, you have the tools that you can use to make knives and other things. The coffee scoop is very simple, easy, quick, and the return on investment is actually really good. Now, we do make some tools that goes along with this kit. That's 2-inch swage block that we press here. These are custom swage blocks. I even made the dies that fit into my press to make this easy, so they're a little bit oversized so nothing sticks in the swage. The 2-inch ball bearing top tool, that is a really handy thing because you can use it to actually push out the scoop and dome it out. Then you can flip it over, bolt it down to a piece of wood, or set it on your anvil and use it as a texturing tool. So you can put that scoop right on there. With a ball peen hammer, you can actually texturize the scoop, make it look unique and interesting and handmade in a very short amount of time. This video really is just about putting the scoop together and making it a unique piece that you can sell or keep in your own kitchen if you want. So let's get started. So the first step of building this coffee scoop is to take the handle and the scoop plate itself and deburr it and round over the edges of this plate. I like a little bit of a softer edge on the scoop itself, and if you do it now before you press it into a dome, then it will be it's so much easier actually to do it this way. And also on the handle, I like to remove any burrs or, you know, and hard edges. Even though I am going to be texturizing this, that adds a nice feature later when you hit it with a hammer and this is already slightly rounded over. It just really feels better in the hand. Now, in order to do this, I'm using my 2x72 belt grinder. This is the Revolution 2x72. We make these here at Housemade. You can build your own. Go to our website, housemade.us. Check out our kits, pieces, parts, and plans. It will truly revolutionize your workshop. We are going to be using a 120 grit VSM belt for this. And remember that if you use like a contact wheel like this that comes on the Gen 5 Revolution, just make light swipes. Light passes, don't go too crazy. You're not going to take off a lot of material. You just really want to go slow on this. Okay, so you can see here what I've done. I've broken the edges and rounded things over a little bit. I am going to go back and take off these laser cut marks around this copper. I'm going to soften those up just a little bit more. I did the same exact thing on the handle. Broke the edges just slightly, maybe 5/10 thousandths, something like that. And then just deburred the edges, rounded over things just a little bit. Remember, you can go back and change this up. You know, it's not that tough to go do that. But in this state, it's easier to work with this material while it's flat like this, and you're not trying to work around the scoop and other things. So, yeah. You can see here I also kind of took the tip off, this little sharp tip. I just grind that back a little bit. You don't want to poke yourself, just take that off. But yeah, looks pretty good. Now let's move on to doming out the copper. All right, so now we're going to dome out the copper plate here. And we're going to use our swage block and our top tool for this. You do not need a press for this. I'm just using my press because that's what I have on hand. You can see here I've got my flat up top, flat on the bottom. I've got my swage block here, and I'm going to place the copper scoop somewhere in the middle. Just doesn't really matter. It's not going to get stuck in there. We've designed it so that when you do press down on this, that should just pop right out. You could do this with a bottle jack. You could do this with just simply some pressure on this top tool. The reality of it is what you're trying to do is just push this down into this so that this will form a nice little scoop, okay? It's really that simple. There's not much more to it. And remember, copper is so soft, you don't have to heat it up. It'll just go ahead and press out just fine that way. Now, stainless is a little tougher. We do sell the stainless scoop kit. However, I don't heat that up either. I just press it cold and it works fine. Now, if you do want to heat it up a little bit, it will soften it so that you can do that a little easier if you don't have a press, okay? In order to keep my fingers out of there, I'm going to put my top tool and some tongs, set it somewhere in the middle, and we will press this out. There we go. All right, so now we're over at the anvil. We've got our top tool here. We've got our domed out copper scoop and your favorite ball peen hammer, or you can get different size ball peens and make it, you know, different textures using the different diameters of ball on your hammers. And this is very simple. Literally all we're doing is striking down on the copper and then turning the copper as we do it. Remember, you're using this top tool as like a small anvil. It does not have to be mounted to your anvil or anything at all. You can just use the weight of your hand to hold it down. Obviously, be careful, don't hit your hand. But remember, you're hitting and striking down in the top zone of this ball bearing here. Now, if you go in at the side, you start using the side here, you could risk dislodging this ball bearing from this plate. Believe it or not, that can happen. So just keep that in mind. You want to strike down and make your dents in the copper. And it does not take a lot of force or energy to do this. Just a simple, you can see here, 1 or 2 hits. And I've already made some really cool looking indents in this, and now we're going to wash, rinse, and repeat. And what's cool about this is you could turn this all the way like this, get around the edges and everything using this tool right here. Now, if you don't have an anvil, we've included some holes in this plate so that you can screw this down to a stump or a piece of wood, clamp it down, whatever it might be, and use this as your anvil. Believe it or not, I actually kind of prefer it on the wood block than I do on my regular anvil. It deadens the sound a little bit, and you still get the same amount of texturing for the same amount of force. It's actually no different. All right, so you can see we've got the doming done, and you can also see why I suggested to take the edges off of this, because when you dome it over, it's a little tougher to get inside of this. You can do it with sandpaper and a file, but if it's flat, it makes it so much easier. Now we're going to take this over to the Revolution with a Scotch-Brite belt, and we're going to just soften these edges once again, smooth everything out, and move on to the handle. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested in this hammer, this is a handmade hammer by my friend Cliff Dufton. If you look him up, I'll put a link to his Instagram down below. His hammers are top-notch, beautiful, and it's one of my favorite pieces. All right, so here's where we are with this. I rounded over this just a little bit more, smooth things out just a little bit more with a Scotch-Brite, clean things up a bit. Hit it with a wire wheel and a little polishing rag just to see what I could, what I could bring out of the copper. In another video, I'll show you some different techniques of changing colors of copper if you want, with heat and other things. But for now, I like this, so I'm going to keep it in right here for now. And I'm going to just do one last thing before I set this aside and go to work with the handle, is I'm going to take my rivets and I'm going to see if they fit through the holes, and they don't. So they've been deformed enough to where the holes are not quite big enough to allow the rivet through, and I've got a really easy trick so that it'll open up those holes. And your first instinct might be to grab a drill and a drill bit and drill this out, and I want to talk you out of that. because if you do miss or the drill bit were to catch, it could sling this thing, dent it, or scratch it, or whatever. Remember, you're making a thing of beauty, something that you're going to cherish or give away as a gift or sell. And if you get a scratch or something on it or a dent on it, you know, that might affect how it looks and how it performs. So let's grab a drill and a jeweler's file, like a round jeweler's file. We're going to mount the file in the drill, and we're just going to go in and out of these holes to widen them out just a little bit. We're going to take some care and time when we do this. We're not going to rush this process because we don't want to scratch the beautiful finish that we have on here. Now you can see those rivets fit through just fine, and we didn't mar the finish on the inside. Everything looks nice and clean in there and not dinged up. Let's go ahead and set this aside and move on to the handle. Okay, so here's what the handle looks like. It's 1/8 of an inch thick, 304 stainless. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some heat. I'm going to warm this up. I'm going to go ahead and use my ball peen hammer and my anvil, and I'm going to texture it. Now this is just something you can do to your taste, okay? This is like more of an aesthetic thing than anything else. But I got to tell you, it really makes the scoop pop when you've got a hand-hammered, textured handle. Now there's a couple ways you can warm these up. You can just use a simple torch. You can use a forge. And in my case, I'm going to use induction. If you've never seen or heard of induction before, it uses magnetism or electronic fields that create a magnetic field to warm up steel. Basically, I'm not smart enough to understand what's going on here. All I know is that it works, and I love my induction forge. If you're interested in building one for yourself or buying one, I'll put links down in the description so you can build your own setup like mine. You can see here I'm about halfway through the process and how different that steel looks once you warm it up. It's a nice patina on it, and because it's 304 stainless, it will not corrode, it won't oxidize. The one thing I wanted to talk about during this process is, as makers, and maybe a lot of you are men who are doing this work, I encourage you to take some time and really watch what you're doing here, you know, marring the edges, making it look very handmade, and also just a little bit of patience. Take it slow, work through the process, and just enjoy it. And I know that that's hard for some of us, me included. But when I started this creative endeavor, I really wanted to bridge the gap between manufacturing and artistry, bring those two things together. And in order to do that, you got to slow down. You really got to take your time. So I encourage you to do that while you're doing this process. Now, let's continue. Okay, you can see here we're all done with the texturing, and now I'm just checking to make sure everything is in alignment. If it's not, I'm just making small minor adjustments to the handle itself while it's still slightly warm. I just straighten everything out. And remember, it's a handmade item, right? Doesn't have to be perfect. We're not striving for perfection here. We're striving for uniformity, beauty, and function. All right, now it's time for our hot stamp. I'm going to go ahead and heat up the end here and put my hot stamp on this end. You can put it anywhere you want, or no hot stamp at all if you don't have one. I like my skull and lightning bolt to go right on the end. Okay, so now we got the handle all texturized. We got our hot stamp on there. We need to bend over this end, radius it over, in order for it to conform to the scoop itself. And there's a real easy way to do this. We're going to use our swage block and our top tool. We're going to very gently rest this in there vertically. We don't need to do this very hard. If you press this too much, you're going to put a dent in this handle, and it's not going to look very good. So take your time doing this. Or of course, you can do it by hand. You can just rest it over the top tool and peen it over with a hammer, but I prefer this process because it's so much faster. You're going to take that top tool and the press and the swage block. We're just going to squeeze gently and let the handle form itself around the top tool. Now look at that. Look how easy that was. Again, take your time with this process. because if you squeeze too tightly, you could damage the handle or pinch the handle and thin it out too much. As you can see, the holes in the scoop line up with the holes in the handle, and the curvature is just about right. Now, we're not aiming for perfection in this process because you can actually bend these over a little bit more when we are peening over the rivets. All right, now we're back at our block of wood and our top tool here. I'm going to grab our rivets, and we are going to just slide them up through the scoop itself. You can do this one at a time if you want to. I like to do them at the same time. And then we're going to fit the handle over one, and it's a little fiddly, just be aware, but you can get them both through there, no problem. Everything lines up. And then we're going to set the whole assembly down on the top tool, okay? And holding in position here, we are going to just lightly peen over one of the rivets, okay? And when you watch me do this, you're going to see me going back and forth between the two rivets. I'm not going to fully rivet one down first. I'm going to watch as I go on how these rivets behave, because if you've never done this before, rivets can be very finicky. They can kind of like move left to right or whatever, so you want to go slow. This is not a fast process, and like I said, just do a few taps on one, then rotate and go a few taps on the other, and you're basically gently pushing down both rivets as evenly as possible. And once you mushroom over one of the rivets, it is in a position where it can no longer become dislodged, so you don't have to keep holding such a tight grasp on this to keep it from falling apart. It will be loose for a while, but it'll start to tighten up as you go. Probably hard to tell from the video, but I'm not applying a ton of pressure when I'm peening these. These are just very light taps. I'm almost just using the weight of the hammer itself. And my goal here when I'm riveting this is to allow the rivet to mushroom out evenly. I don't want that rivet to bend over at all. I just want it to mushroom down and get flat. Now you can see I've got a little bit of a gap on the one side where the curvature of this is not quite right, of the handle itself. So I'm going to start using the flat side of my hammer to kind of peen over the copper rivets and round over the handle at the same time, utilizing the radius of this ball bearing as my anvil to make that happen. So a little more force is required. And you want to do this kind of equally as well. And now you can see things are really starting to tighten up. And also the tip right here is sticking out a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that down as well. Give those copper rivets a little bit of texture. And I'm really liking the way that this is coming out. What a beautiful piece. Now there's one more decision to make in regards to this coffee scoop, and that's the angle in which the handle comes up and off of the scoop itself. Right now it's sitting kind of like this, where it's more like a spoon or whatever. Some people like it straight out. I like it somewhere in between, so very simply and easily you could just set this down on whatever and, you know, essentially bend it with your hand like that, or just take a hammer and tap it out like that. Just checking every once in a while for the angle in which it's sitting. Let's do a little more. And now we're a little more flat and a little more ergonomic and easy to use. If you're scooping stuff, it's just a little easier to hold everything, and I really like the way that this looks. If you are interested in making one of these scoops for yourself, make sure you go to my website, housemade.us. We have an entire section on the website dedicated to the coffee scoop, the scoops themselves, the kits, and the tools to make them. I truly appreciate you guys following along with the progress and process of me doing all of this work. Because of you, I am successful. Thank you so very much for all your love and support over the years. And as always, the best way to support me and my work is to go to my website, housemade.us, buy pieces, parts, and plans for all the projects we have there, including the Revolution, the Apollo Forge, and now the Coffee Scoop Kit. So thank you so much, guys, for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. My name is Brian House, and this has been House Made.